Hello students, welcome to my channel Notes with Kriti. Today we will study about the most scoring and easiest chapter of class 11 biology, that is the living world. As you all know, NCERT book is very important for NEET exam. So today we will discuss the important lines from the NCERT book from where NEET questions usually comes. It is also helpful for your school exams. Please stay tuned till the end to clearly understand the chapter. The living world. Now you can see the meaning of diversity is written, that is variation or differences. Okay. Here in this chapter you are going to study about the unique nature of the plants and animals, or we can say the variety of the living beings. Okay. Now we will discuss the lines from the NCERT which are important for your exam. First line, biology is the science of life forms, that is organisms, and living processes, that is physiological process. Okay. Now what are organisms? Organisms means any organic living system that function as an individual entity. Okay, and living processes or the physiological process means which are vital for organism to live. Like for us or animals, digestion, metabolism, excretion, these are the physiological processes which are vital for us to live, right? For trees it can be photosynthesis, right? Next, early man could easily perceive the difference between inanimate matter and living organisms. Okay, inanimate means which has no life or not moving around. Okay, animate means simply alive, which is to move around. Okay, next, early man deified or worshipped some inanimate matter like wind, sea, fire, etc., and some among the animals and plants. Okay, they used to worship them. The early man used to worship some inanimate matters like wind, sea, fire, and some plants and animals, right? Now next line, societies indulged in anthropocentric view of biology could register limited progress in biological knowledge. Okay, anthropocentric means relating to humans or human centered. Okay, societies had the human centered view of biology. That's why they were limited knowledge, they gained limited knowledge of biology. Okay. Now, systematic and monumental facts description of life forms, detailed systems of identification, nomenclature and classification. Okay. For the description of life forms, systematic and monumental facts are required. Okay. Systematic means well ordered and monumental facts means historically notable, important or of lasting value. Okay, for that these three processes required: identification, nomenclature, classification. Okay, now as we were studying how anthropocentric view limited the biological knowledge, so what happened that we not only know human beings but other living organisms also in this planet. So this spin-off happened. What? Biggest spin-off of such studies was the recognition of sharing similarities among living organisms, both horizontally and vertically. Horizontally means between species and vertically means within the species or among the family. Okay, when we started studying the similarities between the species or within the species, we started knowing more about the biology. Okay. Now we'll learn about Ernst Mayr. Okay. This is his birth year and death year. Now, he was evolutionary biologist. Okay. Second, he was the Darwin of the 20th century. Very important. You should remember it, that he was the Darwin of the 20th century. Next, he was Alexander Agassiz Professor of Zoology Emeritus, or Emeritus we say. Okay. Next, he researched on ornithology, taxonomy, zoogeography, evolution, systematics, history and philosophy of biology. Okay, there is a part in your book where the biography of Ernst Mayr is written. Okay, you will mark all these things. This is written. Most importantly, you will mark this. Okay, the Darwin of the 20th century. Okay, next. Okay, now Ernst Mayr pioneered the definition of biological species. Now, pioneering and coining is very different. Ernst Mayr pioneered the definition of biological species, but John Ray, remember the name, John Ray, Johnray, John Ray coined the term species. Okay, now Ernst Mayr got the triple crown of biology. Okay, first one is the Balzan Prize 1983, International Prize for Biology 1994, and the Crawford Prize 1999. Very important, you have to remember these three awards, which are together known as Triple Crown of Biology. Okay. Now there are 5 characteristics of the living organism, that is growth, reproduction, metabolism, cellular organization and consciousness. Okay. And now we will discuss these 5 characteristics of the living organisms. The first characteristic of the living organism is growth. Okay. Increase in mass and increase in number of individuals are the twin characteristics of growth. Remember, increase in mass and increase in number. Now, there are 2 types of organisms. We all know unicellular and multicellular. So, what does increase in number for unicellular organism means? That is, increase in number of individuals. Okay, they divide and the individuals number grow. Okay, but for multicellular, it is increase in number of cells. Okay, there only growth of cells are happening, not the number of individuals is happening, not the increase of the number of individuals. Now next, both multicellular and unicellular organism grows by cell division up to certain age. Okay, they will stop growing after certain age. Next, in plants, growth by cell division occurs continuously throughout their lifespan. They grow continuously, they don't stop. For us, like multicellular, unicellular living organisms, except the plants, they grow till certain age and then they stop. But plants, they all the time are growing. Okay, because of their ability. We say that as meristem capacity. Okay. Now, can easily observe growth of unicellular organisms in vitro cultures by simply counting the number of cells under microscope. Okay, E. coli, this is a bacteria. Okay, they divide, they take time to divide, that is 20 minutes. So if there was 1 E. coli, they will take 20 minutes and they will become 2. After more 20 minutes, that is totally 40 minutes, if we say, they will become 4. Okay, if you watch this E. coli under microscope, you will see that the cellular division is happening, that they're increasing the number of individuals, right? That's why I have written that reproduction and growth are synonymous for unicellular. Okay. Now in vitro and in vivo. Right? In vitro means which are performed in test tube. Okay. And in vivo means which is happening within the living organisms. So if I say the example, you have heard about test tube baby technology, that is in vitro. Okay, if the baby is born inside a mother's womb, if baby is growing inside a mother's womb, that is in vivo. Okay. Next, increase in body mass is considered as growth. Okay. Any body mass, that is considered as growth. Non-living objects grow, that is increase in body mass. Accumulation, how? How do they grow? Accumulation of material on surface. Okay. Sometimes it happens that on some surfaces the dust are coming, all those any microorganisms, they are all accumulating on the surface, and that surface is gaining the mass. Okay, that is also growth. Because in the first we have said that increase in mass and increase in number of the individuals are twin characteristic of growth. So increase in mass comes under the characteristic of growth. So if non-living things also increases in mass, that means that it is also growing, right? Therefore, what is happening? Growth is not defining property. It is characteristics. Okay. Now, to understand what is defining property and what is characteristic property, listen to me very carefully. There are two properties of a living body. First one, defining properties. Second one, characteristic properties. Defining properties means which are universally present in all living organisms and they have no exceptions. Okay. And characteristic properties means which are not universally present in all living organisms. So as because growth is occurring in non-living, okay, and sometimes there are certain living organisms where actually growth doesn't happen, they stay the same. So there are exceptions happening. That's why growth is a characteristic property. Okay. Now the next characteristic is reproduction. Reproduction refers to the production of progeny possessing features more or less similar to those of parents. Reproduction means production of progeny or offspring. Okay. And they will possess the features more or less similar to those of parents. If we say more or less similar, that is sexual reproduction we are talking about. But if it's exact same to the parents, that means it is asexual reproduction. Okay. Look at you. You are not absolutely looking like your mom or dad. You do possess their features, right? But for Hydra, we can say that it does possess the similar feature, I mean the exact same features of the parent body, right? Now, we'll study about some examples of asexual reproduction which you have learned from, class 6, 7, at that age you have learned all these things, but it's very important, you should remember. Sometimes you forget all this example. So asexual, firstly you have to know what is asexual reproduction. Listen to me. Morphologically and genetically similar to parents of each other. That is asexual reproduction. Okay. Now we have first example here, fungi. They multiply and spread easily due to the millions of asexual spores they produce. Okay. Eastern hydra, budding, planaria or flatworms, through regeneration. Fungi, filamentous algae, protonema mosses, fragmentation. Now fungi has many different types of reproduction. It does reproduction in different situations, right? It has sexual reproduction, it has asexual reproduction. All those you will all study in the next chapter. Okay. Next is, for unicellular organism, reproduction is synonymous to growth. You know that, right? For unicellular organism, if you say the unicellular organism is growing, that means it is also reproducing. Okay. Next, organism like mules, sterile worker bees, infertile human couples, etc. do not reproduce. Nice. So the reproduction is not defining property. I just discussed with you before what is defining property and what is characteristic property of a living body. Okay, so reproduction doesn't come under the defining property, only because it has exceptions like this. The organisms like mules, sterile worker bees, infertile human couples do not reproduce. Okay, all these are exceptions. So that is why reproduction is a characteristic property. Now the next characteristic is metabolism. All living organisms are made of chemicals. These chemicals, small and big, of various classes, sizes and functions, etc., are constantly being made and changed into biomolecules. These conversions of chemical reactions are known as metabolic reactions. Okay? All the time in our body, these reactions are happening. Digestion, blood circulation, neural control, respirations, excretions, all this kind of things in our body, in human body, requires chemical reactions. And all these chemical reactions are known as metabolism. Okay. Now, these chemicals, in this reaction, what is happening? These chemicals are changed into biomolecules. Biomolecules like carbohydrate, protein, fat and nucleic acids. Right? These biomolecules builds the organism from single cells to complex living beings by interacting with each other. Okay? Now, thousands of metabolic reactions occurring simultaneously inside all living organisms, be it unicellular or multicellular. As I said, the digestion, your blood circulation, your respiration, you're doing it simultaneously, right? So what is happening? The metabolic reactions are also happening simultaneously, both for unicellular and multicellular organisms. Okay? The sum total of all the chemical reactions occurring in our body is metabolism. All the reactions, all the sum total of all chemical reactions is metabolic reaction. Now, metabolism is mainly made up of two types. Two types of reaction, that is anabolism and catabolism. Anabolism means building of reaction. Catabolism means breaking down of the reaction. Anabolism example can be photosynthesis. Catabolism can be cellular respiration. And respiration is where both anabolism and catabolism happens. Okay, remember. Now the next is metabolic reactions outside of the body of an organism performed in a test tube is neither living or non-living. Actually, it will be non-living. That means whatever chemical reactions or metabolic reactions if you are performing in a lab, that is not living nor non-living. Okay, so there is no exception of this metabolic reactions. That is why the metabolism is what? A defining feature. Okay, metabolism is a defining feature. So the next characteristic is consciousness. Living organisms has the ability to sense their surroundings or environment and respond to the environmental stimuli that can be physical, chemical or biological. Okay, so if you touch something hot or cold, you know that you can respond to it, right? So that is a million example of physical stimuli, but you have that consciousness that you are touching something hot or cold, right? Example of chemical stimuli, if you want, it can be when you're eating different kind of foods. So if it's a salty food, you can taste if it's salty or not. If it's bitter, you can taste the bitterness of the food. Okay, the taste is actually the chemical stimuli. Biological stimuli can be hunger, sadness. These are the biological stimuli. Biological stimuli for plants, it can be sunlight, which helps them to grow for certain plants, right? Next, plants respond to external factors like light, water, temperature, other organisms, pollutants, etc. Right? They respond to light, water, temperature, other organisms. You know that. Okay? Next, from prokaryotes to most complex eukaryotes can sense and respond to environmental cues. So from very simple organism, that is prokaryotes, to very complex organisms under the eukaryotes, they can sense and respond to the environmental cues or stimuli. Okay. Next, photoperiod affects seasonal breeders, both plants and animals. Some certain plants, they breed at certain time. Okay, certain animals, they also breed at certain time. Okay, so because of the photoperiod, that affects. That is also an environmental stimuli, right? Next, organisms are aware of their surroundings. Only human beings are aware of himself. All the organisms are aware of the surroundings. Right? They know that if there is any danger or not, if there is any food or not. But only human beings know that that person exists. Okay, that is known as self-consciousness. Okay, so what is happening? The consciousness is defining property of the living organism. Okay, because there is no exception. Next, we are going to study that it's not that important, but just it's written in your NCERT book, this line. Properties of tissues are not present in the constituent cells but arise as a result of interactions among the constituent cells. Okay. Properties of cellular organelles are not present in molecular constituents of the organelle but the interactions among them. Okay. Because of the interactions among the cells and the organelles, the properties are arising. Okay. Remember them. Now, more the interactions, more complex level of organisms there are. Okay, so there is saying these interactions results in emergent properties at a higher level of organism. Okay, in the next point, we can see the living organism, any living organisms, they are self-replicating, they are evolving, they are self-regulating and capable of responding to external stimuli. This is the summary of what you have read till now. Okay. Now what is nomenclature? You can see it is written process of standardizing the naming living organism. Such a particular organism is known by same name all over the world. Okay. If a living organism has different name, suppose in USA it is known as different name, in China it is known as a different name, if in India it is known as a different name, it clearly raises confusion, right? So what happens is this nomenclature enables people from all over the world to communicate clearly about different plant and animal species. Okay. Identification, which basically means correct description of any living organism. Okay, without identifying any living organism, you cannot give its name naturally. So nomenclature or naming is only possible when the organism is described correctly and what organism the name is attached to. Right? Now, scientific names are based on agreed principles and criteria. So as we are talking about the naming certain living organisms, we are talking about scientific names. Okay. Now, this ICBN, International Code for Botanical Nomenclature, and ICZN, International Code for Zoological Nomenclature, they actually establish the set of rules or guidelines for naming. Okay, please remember ICBN and ICZN. International Code for Botanical Nomenclature, International Code for Zoological Nomenclature. Next, sorry for the sound. Right now FIFA World Cup is going on, so you know there is a lot of sounds. Okay. Now, scientific names has two components. One, generic name, and specific epithet. The system of providing a name with the two components is known as the binomial nomenclature. Binomial, why? Because it needs two components. So the name comes from binomial, and nomenclature means naming. Okay. The naming system was given by Carolus Linnaeus. Remember, the naming system was given by whom? Carolus Linnaeus. Rules of nomenclature. Now, there are certain rules which are followed while writing scientific names. Okay, and there will be one or two questions about the scientific names, and you should know every point by heart. Okay, first one. Biological names are generally in Latin and written in italics. Okay. The first word in a biological name represent the genus, while the second word, the second component, denotes the specific epithet. That's why we call it as binomial nomenclature, right? Now, both words in a biological name, when handwritten, if it's not handwritten, it will be in italics, but if it is in handwritten, there should be separately underlined, or if printed in italics, to indicate the Latin origin. If it printed, then it will be in italics. If handwritten, then they should be separately underlined. Under the genus, you will underline. Under the specific epithet, you will underline. Okay. So, as I said, the first word denotes genus, and the second is starts with capital letter. The genus starts with capital letter, and the second word is a specific epithet which starts with the small letter. Okay. Name of the author appears after the specific epithet. That is end of the biological name. Why? Because it indicates that this species was first described by Linnaeus. Okay. Example, Magnifera indica. See, LINN. Okay, there is no underline under this lane, but Magnifera separately underlined. Magnifera indica. Magnifera M is in capital, indica I is in small. Okay. It is a scientific name or biological name for mango. This one is right. This one is right. This one is not. Okay. When there will be option, you will obviously correct, or obviously choose this one where Lin is written. Okay. Magnifera indica Linnaeus. And Homo sapiens, human, Oryza sativa, that is for rice. Now, who was regarded as the father of taxonomy? Carolus Linnaeus. Who gave the naming system? Carolus Linnaeus. Remember. Okay, now taxonomy consists of these 5 systems: observation, description, identification, classification, nomenclature. Observation and description comes under characterization. Identification, classification, nomenclature comes under the basis of taxonomy. You have learned about identification, you have learned about nomenclature, right? Only classification is left. So what is classification? Here it is written. Classification is the process by which anything is grouped into convenient categories based on some easily observable characters. Okay? They used any observable characters to group those plants or animals, whatever, any living organisms. Okay. Taxa. The scientific term for any unit used in the science of biological classification is called taxa. So, any unit like order, class, phylum, kingdom, these are all taxa. These are all units and these are known as taxa. Okay. Now, what is taxonomy? Taxonomy is the science of defining groups of biological organisms on the basis of shared characteristics and giving names to those groups. Okay, taxonomy is defining those groups of biological organisms which we did in classification, and we are giving names to those groups. Okay. Now, systematic is a branch of study, okay, which includes taxonomy plus phylogeny. How? Let us first know that from where this systematic word's derived. It has derived from the Latin word systema, which means systematic arrangement of organism. Okay. Now, as I said before, systematics means taxonomy plus phylogeny. We know taxonomy, right? But what is phylogeny? Phylogeny is evolutionary relationships of the living organisms. Systematic is the study of diversification of living forms, both past and present, and the relationships among living things through time. Okay? Human beings were always interested in different kinds of organisms and the diversities. Systematic is the only branch of studies which helps us to understand the diversification of the living organisms, and it also takes into account of the evolutionary relationships of the organisms. Okay, the next important part here is Linnaeus used Systema Naturae as a title of his publication. Okay, he published a study of systematics and he used Systema Naturae as a title of his publication. Taxonomic category. Classification involves hierarchy of steps in which each steps represent a rank or category. Okay, these are rank or categories. Okay, and we call it as taxonomic categories. Okay, and all these taxonomic categories constitute of taxonomic hierarchy. Okay, now I've written some suffix. Okay, these are suffix. For phylum division we use phyta, sperma. For class we can use we use AE or Opsida. Order ALES. I'm telling you the spelling, okay, so that you understand. I'll tell you the example later on. For family, we use ACEAE, okay. Now here, you should remember, as we go up, okay, the generalization of those organism increases, okay, and as we go down, the similar character of those living organisms decreases, okay. And this 7 obligatory taxonomic hierarchy was given by Linnaeus, okay. Now there are non-Linnaeus also, okay. There is non-Linnaeus taxonomic hierarchy where between family and genus there is tribe, okay, and after species there are subspecies or variety. Just remember that. And again, John Ray coined the word species. Write it down. John Ray coined the word species, okay. Now in your NCERT biology book, there is this table 1.1, organisms with their taxonomic categories. This table is very important, okay. Remember every word from this table by heart, okay. You have to remember everything. This table is very important, okay. Mark it. Now there are some example of each taxonomic categories. Like for kingdom, we have kingdom Animalia, kingdom Plantae. For phylum divisions, we have phylum Chordata, right? A common feature like presence of notochord or dorsal holoneural system, that is phylum Chordata. For class, we have class Mammalia, class Insecta, order Primata, polymonials like Solanaceae, Convolvulaceae. Family, we have Felidae like lion, tiger, leopard. Canidae, we have dogs and fox, okay. Genus, we have Solanum, where potato and brinjal comes. Then Panthera, where lion, leopard, tiger. Species, Magnifera, Solanum, Panthera, Homo. Okay, these are some examples. Taxonomical aids or help. Taxonomic aids are necessary to study species of plants and animals and other organisms. You know that. See, we should always know the general bioresources and the diversity. But they are also useful, these organisms are useful in agriculture, forestry, industry, in this kind of fields, right? So we should have the knowledge about those organisms, right? So that is why what is happening, biologists, they are establishing certain procedures, certain techniques, okay, so that they preserve the information, okay, and information about the plants and animals and other organisms as well as those specimens, okay. And these things requires classification, identification. We have studied about them, right? So now the first thing is herbarium, what you are going to study. Herbarium is a storehouse, or we say it repository, where collected plant specimens are dried, pressed and preserved on sheets. These sheets are now arranged to a universally accepted system of classification. Okay. Now, these sheets carry a level data, place of collection, English names, local name, botanical name, family, collector's name. This is the overall what we should know about the herbarium. Okay. Now, botanical gardens are specialized gardens. Okay. Collections of living plants for reference. Now, in this botanical gardens, plants are grown for identification purposes or for references. Okay, in herbarium what is happening? You are collecting the plant specimens, you are drying them, pressing them, and you are preserving them on sheets. But in the botanical garden you are growing them, okay, growing those plants for identification purposes. And after growing, each plants are labeled with botanical or scientific name and their family name. Okay, now there are three famous botanical gardens. One is at Kew, England. Second one is in Indian Botanical Garden, that is Howrah, India. And third one is in Lucknow, that is National Botanical Research Institute. Okay, remember these three famous botanical garden names. Biological Museum. Biological Museum is mainly used for study and reference. Now, it has collections of preserved plants and animal specimens. Okay, they are preserved in what? In containers or jars. Okay, in preservative solution. Now, the preservative solution is formalin. Remember, okay. How are plants and animals preserved? They are preserved as dry specimens. How are insects preserved? They are preserved in insect boxes. They are collected, killed, and then pinned. Okay. How are birds and mammals preserved? They are stuffed and preserved. Okay. This biological museum also have collection of skeletons of animals. Okay. Zoological parks. Now it's commonly known as zoo, and wild animals are kept in the protected environments under human care. You know that. And what happens when you go to zoo? You learn about their food habits, their behavior, where they come from, right? Now, these animals are provided the conditions similar to the natural environment or natural habitat as far as possible. Okay, similar, same to same conditions cannot be provided, but they try to provide the natural environment so that they live there, in a healthy conditions. Now, key is an analytical method, okay, which are used for identification of plants and animals based on their similarities and dissimilarities. Okay, these keys are based on contrasting characters in a pair called couplet. This couplet what represents the choice made between two opposite options. Okay, where there is acceptance of only one option and rejection of the other option. Okay, now each statement in the key is called lead. Now let me make you understand the key by giving you an example. So there are two types of fruit, banana and orange, and there is couplet given. In the couplet, the first statement is fruit long and narrow, yellow, flesh not divided into sections. Okay, and the second statement in the couplet is fruit round, inner flesh divided into several segments. Okay, so in the first statement it is banana, and the second statement that is orange. Okay, so this is how keys are created, and there are many complicated ways keys are created. I just gave you a very simple, very basic example. Okay, and the second thing is the separate taxonomic keys are required for each taxonomic category. Okay, family, genus, species, they will have different taxonomic key categories. Okay, flora. Flora contains the actual account of habitat and distribution of plants of a given area. Okay, this flora also gives the index to the plant species found in a particular area. Manuals. This provides information for identification of names of species found in an area. Monographs They contain information of any one taxon and catalog. It is an alphabetical list of species. Now this chapter is complete, and if you revise these notes once again, you will be absolutely done with this chapter, I assure you. And thank you, students.